You're listening to Investify, preaching financial independence and assisting investors to achieve a more flexible and free lifestyle through smart financial planning and real estate investing. If leaving the corporate world and jumping into this thriving industry is what you desire, tune in and listen to stories of like-minded individuals who made the leap to financial independence. Equip yourself with the right tips and tricks to start your real estate journey, making active or passive ventures that are highly profitable and rewarding. Here are your hosts, Craig Kurlop and Zeona McIntyre.
What's going on, everybody? You are listening to Investify, and I am your host today, Zeona McIntyre. Craig Kurlop is not joining us today because Sarah Weaver and I are doing a little bit of a show takeover. Sarah Weaver and I wrote the book for Bigger Pockets called 30-Day Stay, an investor's guide to mastering the medium-term rental. And we're here to do a deep dive about our book, some of her deals, mindset. This is like a different episode, so I really think this is a good one. Definitely stick around to the end. We go into some creative financing. We talk about being a digital nomad, how she invests from thousands of miles away. We go into furnishing, which is usually a big question for a lot of people. So this is just jam-packed with really, really good info, and I'm excited to bring her on. So without further ado, let's get Sarah on the show. Sarah Weaver, welcome back for episode 2 with us.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so the main reason I have you here today is because you and I wrote a book. Ta-da! So fun.
Yeah, it was that easy. Ta-da!
I know. Well, it kind of seemed like that. I mean, if I think back to the stressful times, I don't think I was ta-daing that much, but it happened so quick. So for you guys listening, yeah, a timeline of a normal book is like 2 years. And for us, we started talking to Bigger Pockets at Bigger Pockets conference last year, 2021. So that was like October. They said yes to us, I think in December. We were writing in January, right? And then we had it done like by March. So how was that for you? It was fast.
It is fast. It's funny. If I had a reality TV show, this is, I don't know if this will be on YouTube, but picture me like two-handed on the keyboard, and then I would like say something, and then I'd be like, oh, that was good. And then I'd write again. And so it was, I love writing. Like I really, really, really love it. And as an extrovert, I thought, oh, I wouldn't be interested in, sitting in a room alone and writing books. But the reality is, I love it.
Yeah. I think for me, it's just like it's so therapeutic. I felt like writing a book was like a spiritual practice. It was not only confronting all of these things. Like for me, it was like doubts and imposter syndrome and can I do it? And then it was also like vulnerability and depth, and we both were like, we cried in that chapter, and then just recalling stories and laughing, and it's just like a really beautiful experience. So if anyone has an inclination to do it, even if you don't feel like that many people will read it, your friends and your mom probably would, so maybe get out there and write yourself a book. Yeah,
absolutely. Well, and you really need to applaud yourself because, we got really vulnerable in the book, and we talked about where we came from versus where we are. And I think as real estate investors, people focus a lot on like, look how many doors I have, look how much cash flow I have. And I feel like we did a really good job in the book talking about the true journey that we took to get there. And we realized that, we both came from not very much money. And we both had a lot of things that were not handed to us, yet we still made a choice. We are scrappy real estate investors that were like, we don't need a high income or a double income household to make this possible. And I think that that's the story that we're trying to tell in the book.
Yeah, I wanted to make it feel really relatable and like accessible for anybody, no matter where they came from. And so this is a fun thing that we could talk about a little bit is like, where did we come from? We both grew up in different areas of the U.S., but we found out I think, trucking along in St. Louis in a U-Haul, that both of our moms had been cleaning ladies, and how cool it is now, like fast forward, that we employ cleaning ladies in multiple states. And I don't know about you, but some of my cleaning ladies are mamas, and they're bringing their babies, and it's so sweet for me to kind of see that again, because I remember sometimes going with my mom to cleans and like watching a movie or something because she just didn't have childcare.
Yeah, that's exactly how I grew up. My dad worked for a home builder, and my mom would clean the new construction houses. So back then we had TVs that were like 2 feet deep and like 1 foot wide, and me and my brother I could carry that by myself, and then my brother would carry our Nintendo 64 with the controllers and all the cords, so many cords back then. And so my little brother would carry that, and I'd carry the TV. My mom would quickly clean a room, put me and my brother in it, and tell us what bathroom we were allowed to use. Because, kids, we'd probably go use all 4 bathrooms, and she'd be like, you guys now have to clean them again. And that was my childhood. And so I grew up playing on dirt piles and hanging out in new construction houses.
Yeah. And so, I mean, how do you feel like that molded you coming from something so simple? I think it's definitely different than having it easy in a way.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I look at what my parents gave me, and of course what my parents haven't given me. I think it's really important to focus on what they have given me first. So we'll get to that. But I do think, I wasn't handed a silver spoon. I paid for college by myself. I had a job when I was 14, and I've worked ever since. And my parents were really supportive emotionally. My mom still gives me incredible boy advice and friend advice. And if I ever don't know what to bring to a party, she's the first person I call. She's really, really good at that stuff. Am I going to have her look over my bookkeeping or my essay? Probably not. But they gave me a lot of really great soft skills. And lovingly, I say they also taught me what not to do. I didn't want to work with my hands. I mean, my mom does actual back-breaking work. She cleans really large 3,000 square foot homes and has to carry all of her supplies and clean the house. She's scrubbing floors on her hands and knees. And my grandfather looked at me and he said, "Kid, I want you to work with your head and not your hands."
That's really good advice. Yeah, I think my parents really showed me what not to do as well. And most of it was in the financial realm. I just saw kind of like money come, but money immediately evaporate. It's like they could never really hold on to anything. And I think when you're a kid, you don't realize that there's something different. And it took me a while to see, like, I don't know that everyone else is struggling. Like, it doesn't look like that. And I kind of wonder if there's some other way. So, yeah, in like high school, my mom and I both got into reading about wealth. And so it was great that she actually set me on that path. And, I took it really far. But it is really sweet how you can kind of grow with your parents. I think we think like, oh my gosh, they already know everything. But as I'm getting into the age where most of my friends are becoming parents, I'm like, whoa, we didn't have anything figured out.
Isn't that the truth?
Totally. Well, okay, so why this topic and why right now?
Yes, medium-term rentals is hands down the rocket fuel that was dosed on my portfolio. So for those of you that don't know, I own 19 units in 4 states. It's 8 properties, only 1 single family, the rest are duplexes and fourplexes. And my long-term rentals cash flow well because I was buying when interest rates were 3%. I was buying at market price or just below, doing a little bit of value add and renovation. And it was working. Like, I don't want to, say anything negative about long-term rentals. Half my portfolio is long-term, half my portfolio is medium-term. And I realized I was not going to get where I wanted to go with long-term rentals fast enough. And so where did I want to go? I wanted to replace my W-2 income so that I could branch out and be a solopreneur. And I just looked at the clock and I was like, man, it's going to take me like 5 years to do this with long-term rentals, which is so cool. Like, how amazing that I was on a path. It's like
not even that long.
No. Like, so grateful. I am incredibly impatient. I mean, it's clearly my only flaw is impatience, but yes, I admit that I'm impatient. And so thankfully I found the medium-term rental strategy because it doubled my cash flow on the 9 units that I decided to furnish. And I was able to quit my job so much faster.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. And, one thing I just want to point out is like, your long-term rentals, if I remember well, you bought a while ago. And so when you bought them, maybe they didn't cash flow that well and it didn't seem that exciting. But like, this is why we buy and hold, because over time, rents go up and your mortgage doesn't change that much, right? So it does build in more cushion if you can hold on to it. And you were able to renovate those with your dad and whatnot. So you've got some time in them, you've got room for them to grow without feeling like you need to add too much to them now.
Absolutely. Well, it's really interesting, actually. I switched. So I bought a single family in 2017, and I was using the rent by the room strategy. So I was getting $2,300 in 2018. What's wild is that now that I've switched back to like a traditional long-term rental with one tenant, I'm actually getting $2,400. So I've only been able to increase rent $100 over whatever that is, 4 years. And so what it really was is just being able to buy with so little money down. And so I did the house hacking strategy for my first 3 properties, and that's what made my long-term rentals such a good deal.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm always telling people house hack if you can. That's like the first thing. And then other than that, get creative if you can't. But yeah, love house hacking. Well, let's talk a little bit about mindset, because it seems like that was like really important for you to include in the book. When you guys get our book, there are some little areas where we have kind of like little mindset check-ins, little stops along the way. Yeah, tell us how that affects your investing now. And it is raining cats and dogs. I don't know if you guys can hear it, but I can't do anything about that.
No, I can barely hear it. That's so funny.
Okay, great.
Hey, you have that or the chickens, so.
I know. It's just a whole symphony here.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm so glad you brought up mindset, because people love to ask me, like, how did you do it? How did you go from 3 to 15 units in 93 days? And while that sounds like a really great headline for a podcast, there's a lot that went into it. And people don't like my answer because it's mindset. How did I do it? Mindset. And they're like, yeah, but how did you do it? I'm like, no, really, mindset. And so what I mean when I say that is I made a decision that I am a real estate investor. It wasn't like I was doing this job over here and then I also was investing in real estate. I started introducing myself as a real estate investor. I started thinking of myself as a real estate investor. And then I started employing the habits of a real estate investor. So I didn't just analyze a deal a day or a deal a week. I was analyzing 5 to 10 deals a day. When one strategy didn't work, I pivoted to another. And when a mentor told me that I was looking at too many markets, I listened to her and I focused on 2 markets with 1 or 2 strategies. And really all of that came down to I made a decision to be an investor. And then I did the habits that it required.
And I feel like you got really good feedback too, because the universe was like, well, I'm going to say no, and I'm going to stop you a lot of times before you made the change, right? So it wasn't just like, oh, I woke up one day and I've got this perfect mindset and I'm just going to, everything's going to work for me. It was like you were putting in offers all over the place and nothing was working. So there was, tell people a little bit about that period, because I think there are probably a lot of people now with high interest rates that are running numbers and can't find things that work. And they're probably pretty frustrated.
Yes. Oh, that's exactly the word I was going to use. If you're listening to this and you are frustrated, that's exactly how I felt. My life was Instagram versus reality. For those of you that know that phrase, on Instagram, I was posting van life, living in New Zealand during the pandemic while everyone was in the US dealing with the pandemic. And so everyone was like, oh, you're so lucky. the reality was, yes, I was in a van somewhere really beautiful, but I was in that van just like crying every time a deal didn't work out. Every time someone rejected an offer, I was like, why is everyone else able to figure this out? You know, Sylvia's going under contract and Corey just bought another deal. I'm like, why me? Why me? And I was sitting in my van so sad and so frustrated. And I realized that every time I wrote an offer, I was going into it with, well, this probably isn't going to get accepted anyway.
That doesn't help.
It didn't help at all. And then I got advice like, well, you're not, you're not going under contract because you don't believe you're going under contract. And my reaction to that was, you don't believe you're going under contract. You know, I was like, that's not helpful either. Because I was so frustrated. It's like when you're really, really angry and your partner's like, why are you so mad? And you're like, ugh.
Like, that's making it worse. Yeah.
So if you're listening to this and you're frustrated, know that it will work out and your frustration's not serving you. And so there's this really great video that I like to show my coaching clients, and it's about, they call it being above the line and below the line. And man, oh man, was I living below the line. You know, I was playing victim. I was pointing blame at everyone, you know, the whole why me, why me. And what I realized is that every time I got an offer rejected or I couldn't find a property or whatever the challenge was, I had to step back and take what I call a 13,000 foot view and see, okay, this is obviously happening for a reason. I don't think that I should be investing in, let's just say, Ohio or Texas. I think the universe is telling me to focus here. And so I listened to those signs and then I started seeing results.
That's great. So yeah, tell us a little bit about what you've bought since, because, you know, I think people love going into the deals and we do that in every show. So I know you've picked up quite a few properties since. So let's hear about those and how they were all, how they worked out.
Yeah, it's so wild, Zeona. You had me on the show back in February of 2021, and I owned 3 units. I owned a single family and a duplex. And since then, I have bought a 4-plex, a duplex, a duplex, a 4-plex, a duplex, and a duplex. And I'm happy to go through like how I financed them, because I think that that's the really fascinating part.
Yeah, let's go into the first deal a lot, and then maybe if there's some tidbits from the others, we can kind of do that. So give us the rundown of like how you found it, how much you paid for it, and all of that.
Absolutely. So the first deal that I bought, again, this was from New Zealand. I was writing offers on things sight unseen, in a town I've never even been to, and another in a town that I'd never visited this part of the town before. So I was writing offers in both Omaha and Des Moines, and my investor-friendly agent, he texted me after I texted him a little push, a nudge, about what I was looking for. I sent him my crystal clear deal criteria, and 4 days later, he sent me an off-market 4-plex. It was owned by 2 commercial real estate agents that wanted to play flipper, and it wasn't really working. So it was kind of a failed flip in a way. And I bought it off of them. And the reason that I was so excited about this particular deal is, 1, it was off market. So I knew I didn't have any other competition, at least not yet. And I knew that we could convince them, or at least I believed that we could convince them to accept a 3.5% FHA owner-occupied loan, which this was in May of 2021. So kind of the height of the frenzy of real estate investors buying a lot of property, as well as your residential buyers buying a lot of property. And not very many people were accepting FHA. The reason being is that FHA does have a couple extra criteria through the inspection period. The bank requires it because it's a federally backed loan. And what that means for a seller is that it might not make it to close. And so if you're going to offer, you know, a 25% down conventional, or of course, if anyone's going to offer all cash, those are a lot more attractive than a 3.5% down payment on using an FHA loan. Yet we convinced them, they're commercial brokers. We said, listen, guys, this investor, Sarah, is serious. If FHA doesn't work out, she'll just simply switch to a regular investment property loan, no problem. And to my agent's surprise, but again, not mine, because I really believed that they would accept it, they accepted that. So I was able to buy a fourplex because one of the units was vacant. So that would be the unit that I would occupy. The other 3 were long-term inherited tenants. And the guys did a really good job fixing up the property. The inspection was really clean. They got the property almost completed. 2 of the units are completely updated. 2 of them are partially updated. And I was able to offer $320,000. They accepted. And that meant I only had to bring $12,000 to the table.
Amazing. Yeah. And so, I mean, what had changed for you where you were like, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, these people are going to accept this offer? Like, were you visualizing and like writing it in your journal and like meditating on that? Sometimes I like take the address and I put my name and I like write my name with the address over and over, like as if I lived there.
Oh, I like
addressing
that.
Envelopes. Yeah.
I like that. That's really, really smart. I love that. I don't remember exactly what I did as far as like what gave me that confidence, but a lot of it, frankly, was like false confidence. Like it was just, I'm like, this is going to work. This has to work because, everyone had been telling me like my negative attitude wasn't getting me anywhere. So I went in really, really optimistic. And sometimes don't get me wrong, sometimes it felt really fake. It's like, I vividly remember I got an offer rejected. I really liked this property. I got an offer rejected and I said, yay, I'm so glad that wasn't accepted. That means I'm one step closer to the deal I'm supposed to have.
And I mean, do you believe that now?
I do now, but when I was saying it, oh my gosh, I was rolling my eyes. I was like, this is the stupidest thing I've ever done. But they tell me that it works, and look, it worked.
There you go. That's so great. Okay, so so you have these inherited tenants, and I mean, I think this probably points towards you having done some renovations before and maybe Omaha not being so terribly far from your parents. I mean, it is kind of far. But what made you feel brave enough to take on a place that was like partially renovated?
Yeah, so partially, I should say it was partially updated. So the units were completely rent ready. They just weren't as beautiful. Like 2 of them are really beautiful and 2 of them are a little shabby. But I didn't need to do any renovations, so it was essentially turnkey. And you're exactly right. It's 3.5 hours from my parents. And so there wasn't a way where I was going to say, hey, can you go and, renovate a kitchen? My parents both still work full time. And so what gave me the confidence, and this is true, like this wasn't false confidence, this was like true, I knew I could do this, was I joined a mastermind with other out-of-state investors, and they were all doing it. And I was like, well, if they can do it, of course I can do it. And, I was able to pick up the phone and what do I do now? What about this? And so having like people that I always like to say, I like to have people 2 steps ahead of me, maybe even 10 steps ahead of me, rather than 100 steps ahead of me, because the people 100 steps ahead of you, that's your goal. Like that's where I'm going. I want to be the investor with 1,000 units, but they don't remember how frustrating, how scary like it is to buy their first property out of state, and in this case out of country. And so I spoke to a lot of people that were 2 or 10 steps ahead of me.
Great. So what about these markets? Like, how did you find Omaha and Des Moines? They sound a little bit like, I don't know, just like unexpected.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have criteria for my markets. We go into detail in the book, but I'll quickly say them. So I want to look at population growth, job growth, meaning there's more jobs, wage growth, meaning they're going to get paid more money so that I can increase rent over time. And I want there to be low crime. I think that's really important. And then I also want areas where I'm getting deal flow. So I could be in love with, let's say, Nashville, Tennessee, but if I don't have an agent sending me viable, available deals, then it doesn't really matter that Nashville matches all my criteria. So I had to have an investor-friendly agent in that market.
Okay. So let's finish up that deal. So you inherited 3 tenants, which sometimes is not great for people. We heard a horror story yesterday about that. But yeah, so what were you paying in a mortgage, and then what were you getting on the get-go? And then I imagine you swapped out some tenants and like kind of what you get later on.
Absolutely. So I furnished the unit I was living in because I was living there and posted that on Airbnb. So my plan was to like have guests on the weekends. I'd go stay at my grandparents' house or go on a trip. And then I had 3 inherited tenants. Fate would have it, the tenant below me just left in the middle of the night. I have no idea what happened or why, but when good things happen, you don't question it. So I quickly cleaned her unit and furnished that unit and put that unit on Airbnb. So then I had 2 tenants whose leases weren't up for another, I believe, 6 months and 8 months. And so I tried my best to make nice with them. One of them is super pleasant and still lives there. She's a fantastic tenant. The other one was incredibly rude. So he would actually send emails like thinking that he was emailing a property management company in all caps. And he would say, "The landlord is an asshole." Sorry, I don't know if I can say that on your podcast, but that was the subject line. That was the subject line. And I was like, he has no idea he's emailing me. So he was not pleasant, yet he paid rent on time. And so again, I went back to mindset. And I was like, clearly this is an issue with him and not an issue with me. And so I'm just going to keep depositing his checks and just count down the days until I can send him a notice of non-renewal when his lease is up, which is exactly what I did. And then he moved out and I furnished his unit as well. And so the numbers on this is my PITI, principal, interest, tax, and insurance, is $2,017. And I pay utilities. Keep in mind with the medium-term rental strategy, you are paying utilities on the units that are furnished. And then I'm handling the lawn care because it's a 4-unit, which I'm thinking it's about $300 a unit and then maybe another $100 to $200 a month in lawn care. Those are kind of rough estimates. Every month is different when you own in really inclement weather. And so those are the 3 units that are furnished, and they are bringing in $1,875 each. So, and they're 1-bedroom, 1-bath units. They're making $1,875. And then my long-term tenant, she pays $830. And so that's about $5,700. Yeah, it's about $5,700 a month. And then again, my PITI is only $2,017.
Great. Yeah. And that it sounds like that's moved up a lot, because I feel like when you first got started, you were like, can I do, I don't know, maybe it was 1,500 or 1,550. And then, I think we'd had some conversations about where I was saying, I kind of play with it. Like it's a little bit of the Wild West out there with the medium-term rentals. And so I would say like, well, when a tenant leaves, let me just try to list it for another $100 or another $50 and just see if somebody bites. It only takes one, right? And then if they don't, then, just adjust it. But have you found that you've been able to just kind of like creep it up? Because that sounds really high.
Yeah, it's incredible. And yes, thanks to you, you gave me the confidence. Because what I love about Furnish Finder is it's just a listing site. It's not a booking site. So we can go in and put in, any number that we want. So if I want to list it for $2,200 just to see if anyone will actually pay that, I can do that. So that's exactly what I did. What's wild is I was looking back through my notes when I first analyzed this deal. When I was under contract, I thought I was going to get $1,250 for a furnished unit. And the numbers were still fantastic. The great thing about doing owner occupied is that it's such a great cash on cash. It does negatively affect your cash flow because your monthly payment's a little bit higher. So even with 25% down, I was looking at like 37% cash on cash. And then my actuals, like what I ended up getting in reality now is $1,875. That happened so quickly. I listed the first one for $1,250. Then I listed the next one for $1,375, then $1,675. And now I'm at $1,875 with no problem. And then I think it's really important to note that I'm at 97% occupancy in my 3 furnished units in that building.
Great. And the furniture makes a huge difference. And so I wouldn't say you're lucky, but you're fortunate that you have this eye for design, so that's probably really helped you. Tell us a little bit about like furnishing your first unit and then furnishing your second unit, because as I understood it, the first unit you were just like, didn't feel like you had a lot of money and you really had to scrap it together. And then what did you learn between those two?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, what was great is I actually had just had a turnover in my single family that I had been doing the rent by the room strategy. So I had furnished partial of that house. So my lovely parents, I like to call them my team packed up that stuff, that furniture from that single family, and then drove a U-Haul that 3.5 hours and then dumped that furniture into the 1-bedroom unit. And so a lot of that furniture, thankfully, I already had owned, which saved me a ton of money. And then to your point, my next couple of units, obviously I didn't have furniture that I could just thrift from my own other rental. So I did have to start purchasing furniture. What I found is that you have to make a time versus money decision. So if you have a bunch of time, then yes, you can save money. You can drive all over town picking up $10 Keurigs. Or if you don't have time, then you click a button and you buy an $89 Keurig on Target.com or Amazon.
Mm-hmm. That shows up to the house, and then you have to figure out what to do with the trash. But yes, it definitely makes it so much quicker. I think that what I've found is like when I first started furnishing units, it was like, it could be like 2 weeks, you know, of just like going around and checking out garage sales and like trying to time everything. And then now the last unit we furnished, we did it in like 3 days, 3 or 4 days, something like that, because it's actually super fast. You have to be a little bit, strategic about checking the dates and making sure everything's going to come in that window of time. Because towards the end, you're just like, well, we're just waiting for this rug to show up, you know, but that can be really, really fast. And then you just have to take a full U-Haul full of trash to the recycle center and stuff. But yeah, I feel like I prefer the new stuff now. And I feel like the new stuff, if you buy it well, like the right materials, it can last a lot better. Yeah,
it can. And it's so important, I think, that we point out, you're exactly right. You can now do a unit in 3 days. I did one in 2 days, like of physically putting in the furniture because I hired help. So I had 3 guys meet me at the house. They were unpacking boxes. They were putting couches together. It was beautiful. I was like, oh my gosh, why haven't I always done this? And I was like, oh yeah, because I didn't always have money. So like that helps a lot. Granted, it wasn't expensive. It was amazing. However, I think it's important that we talk about all of the prep time that goes in before that. So I talk about in the book, we have a furnished tracker. So I'm tracking, or my virtual assistant is tracking every product that I've ordered, the expected delivery date, the actual delivery date, because some things don't show up and you're like, hey, Amazon, don't charge me for that because that didn't show up. And so there is some admin that goes into the lead time before. But what's so important is that if you time it right, then your unit is vacant so much shorter period. So before it would take 2 weeks. Well, that's 2 weeks of your unit being vacant. Whereas now, if you have the prep time prior, you can make it so that your unit's only vacant for like 3 to 10 days. And that means money in your pocket.
Great. I'm going to pause you because I'm going to put in an ad right now. We do live ads here, so everybody's kind of used to saying or hearing them. We talked a little bit about community and how important that is. So if you guys are looking for a community online where you can learn about Airbnb's short-term, medium-term rentals that are furnished, check out Airbnb Investing. We have a community on Facebook, and we also do meetups live in Boulder. And I put like fresh content in there every week. I do Facebook Live, so if you have questions for me, post them there and I will answer your questions live. All right, let's get back to the show. So let's talk a little bit about vacancy and medium-term rentals, because this is actually something I love. I personally have 5 long-term rental units, and even though they can be kind of hands-off in certain ways where like I have a management company that does it, I find that they're just so slow. And maybe it's because I came from like the short-term rental place, but I'm like, okay, if somebody has told you they're moving out, why are we not marketing it now? You know, why do you want to like wait to go see it when it's empty? Like, I understand that you need to see if there's damage, but can we walk through the property now? Like, there's just, everything happens slow. And I find that you lose 2 to 4 weeks because of that. And with short and medium term rental, that just doesn't happen. So tell us a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I'm experiencing that right now with one of my long-term units. I handed it over to a property management company. It's my only property that's being managed by a property management company, and it has been vacant for 3.5 weeks. And so it's
painful.
very frustrating. And then when they do find me a tenant, when they do finally find me a tenant, they're still going to charge me the first month's rent. And I'm like, I think you should be losing money because you kept it vacant. But anyway, I'm off my, I get really frustrated about that.
Me too.
Exactly. So yes, why do I love the medium-term rental strategy? One of the many reasons is vacancy. We keep vacancy really, really low. There are multiple times where I will have someone move out at 10 a.m. and someone new move in at 3 p.m. That means 100% occupancy for that unit. So I am missing no money. The other thing that's happening a couple times for me is that the nurses are actually extending their contract. So for those of you that don't know, most of my units are traveling nurses. They typically take 13-week contracts at the hospital. But about 3 to 4 weeks before their contract ends, they sometimes get asked to extend and stay again or renew their contract. That has happened 47% of the time with my tenants. So that tells me, one,
that.
Oh yeah, I track everything.
That's great. I do not.
And so we are in a good hospital system. So I will continue to buy medium-term rentals in Omaha. And my tenants are happy and satisfied. So the units are cute. They're well maintained. When there is a maintenance request, we take care of it same day if possible. And so my tenants are happy and they're extending. And then that means, no vacancy for 6 months, which means money in my pocket.
That's great. Yeah, I found that it depends on how long they've stayed, but sometimes I like to put a day in between just for surprise. Like you just don't know what you're walking into. And especially if they have pets, sometimes it's nice to have a day in between. But I have found that there's so much demand that you can very often have somebody come same day. And it blows my mind when I think about these long-term rentals where they're like, oh no, we need to paint. Oh no, we need to change the flooring. And I'm like, do you? Like, is it really that different? Because these people stayed half a year and I haven't painted in 4 years. Like, I don't know that that's always true. So maybe it's just the way that people have always done it, but I like to question that norm. All right. Well, I want to hear a little bit about, like, this is taking us back a little bit, but to owner occupy this unit, you had to leave this van in New Zealand. And how was that? Because it was kind of like you really, really, really wanted to be a real estate investor, but moving to Omaha was probably not like the highest thing on your list. So can you tell us about like the sacrifices and how that worked out for you?
Yeah, that was a really nice way to ask it. So thank you. It was a giant sacrifice. I cried a lot. For anyone that knows me, I cry all the time. So usually happy tears. Usually like, a birthday card or a commercial can make me cry. But in this case, it was like sad sobs because I was giving up a part of my identity. And a part of my identity was that I was cool and I lived abroad and I lived in a van and I was like this gypsy, but also, had a full-time job and I was investing in real estate. And I felt like I was giving up a part of my identity. And that was really, really hard. Not to even mention, like, it was so sad to leave this beautiful country that had no COVID cases, and it was paradise. So I sold the van. By the way, I sold the van for $300 less than what I bought it for 15 months earlier. So I lived in the van, so that was like an amazing purchase. So again, another investment, and if you want to call it that. And then I moved to Nebraska, and There were some personal reasons. I was ready to like be near family, and my grandparents live 45 minutes away from the property. My parents live 3.5 hours, which seems far, but that's not far when you've been living on an island in the Pacific Ocean. And so there were some personal reasons that I wanted to move there. And the thing that I could come back to all the time was this phrase, delayed gratification. And was I willing to, give up a part of my identity and my life abroad to move to a town that I had barely even ever been to, and live amongst my tenants? Granted, I had my own 1-bedroom unit, but my tenants lived in the building. And the answer was yes. Because everything is temporary. I knew that if I moved there and I absolutely hated it, well, guess what? I would just move again. Or if I moved there and I hated it, I would just suck it up for a year. The really great thing about owner-occupied is that you intend to live in the property for a year. And so they're not going to make you live there for 10 years. You don't have to live there for 5 years. I think the power of the mortgage system in the United States is that you could house hack every year until they are like, okay, you're done. Or you hit your 10, conventional
10,
loans. Yeah. But sometimes they're like, okay, we see what you're doing here. And so, but that's so powerful as an investor that's willing to make that sacrifice. Am I on this podcast trying to convince families of 5 to go move to Omaha, Nebraska? No. If you have a lovely situation and you're living in a cool place, I'm not telling you to go move to Nebraska. That's just my story. And I knew that delayed gratification was going to basically slingshot me to where I was going. And I was right.
So let's switch gears a little bit and talk about these events that you lead, because we were talking about how important it is to have community. And yeah, your events give people an opportunity to get together with other investors. I think some people live in an investor desert, right? And they don't know how to connect with other investors, and people in their lives don't care about real estate. And I've definitely had that in certain times of my life. So yeah, tell us a little bit about, what you do at your events and why that might be good for somebody.
Absolutely. Yeah, my company, Invested Adventures, really came out of a need that I saw in the community. And it's exactly what you're talking about. A lot of people feel like they don't have anyone to talk about. So what do? They go to their people that they trust and like and know, and they start talking about real estate investing, and they start to get really discouraged. Your uncle's like, oh, I knew a guy who owned a rental property and it was terrible. And so it's a really quick way to let self-doubt seep back in. And I really believe that you're not meant to be lonely. This way that we live, we all go run off and get our own apartments and live alone. That's not the way that humans were designed. I think we were really designed to be in community with one another and have true connection. And social media paired with the pandemic, I think, has left a lot of people feeling really, really disconnected and really lonely. And then the other phenomenon that I see that's happening is that we get real estate investors or anyone, pursuing financial independence. They get it, they reach financial independence, and then they kind of go, now what? And so my desire for Invested Adventures is to serve the investor community by giving them the connection that they crave, the community that they deserve, and some freaking fun. If you're making even $5,000 a month cash flow, go on vacation. People tell me all the time, you're so lucky that you get to travel, or, oh, I've always wanted to go to Machu Picchu, or I've always wanted to hike Patagonia. And I always have to hold my breath or bite my tongue because I'm wanting to say, then why don't you? Buy the plane ticket. And the reality is that they're scared. I have tons of people ask me, how do I travel? How do I do it? I'll sit down and I'll tell them about credit card hacking, how I find cheap flights, how I travel. And then 6 months later, I check in with them, and guess what they've done? Nothing. Yeah. And so I realized, I was like, okay, I have to make it easier for them. And so that's when I started organizing trips. So I'm taking 22 investors on 2 different weeks down to Patagonia to hike the W Trek. This is not a real estate seminar. There's no speakers. There's no presentations. We are just going to be in community with other real estate investors. We can't help ourselves. Of course, we're going to talk about real estate investing, but it's going to be over a beer after a long day of hiking, or I'll be out of breath talking about
trail.
cost segregation. Yeah. The fit friends of mine will have a much better more breathful conversation. But the point is that I want people to like live. I heard a terrible story of someone that had an Antarctica trip planned for her 40th birthday, and she suffered a massive stroke at 39. Or I had someone who, had saved up all their money, had retired early, and then their husband fell ill. And so my biggest urge for people is don't wait. Like, your life is meant to be lived. And so I really hope that people get that from my trip or on their own. And I'm really, really, really passionate about helping people do this.
I love that. Yeah, I think community is just so important, and especially people just starting out, especially women, especially people that are just being told, oh, you can't do that. If you can kind of like tune those people out, you do see so many people on Instagram and TikTok that are doing it, and we're not lying. So you guys can do it too. So it's just about finding those people, whether it's through meetups or events like this or conferences, which, we go to a lot of those, and they're super great for that. So yeah, check out Sarah's events. How can people find it?
Absolutely. If they go to sarahdweaver.com, they're listed there. They also can find me on Instagram, also Sarah D. Weaver. And one of the things I want to bring up, Zeona, is the events are super cool. Like, you're going to have a ton of fun on the event, but I don't do what I do for the event. I do it because of what I call the after effect. So what happens afterward is that people go back home and they tell their boss that they're exhausted. And I had that happen, and this girl's boss now gives her Flex Fridays. So she gets Fridays off to focus on her real estate investing. So what she's decided, she still goes into the office, but she spends the first 3 hours on Fridays catching up on her, personal admin, her inbox, and analyzing deals. And she's happier, and her boss is happy to keep her because he didn't want to lose her. And then I also had someone who went home and had a really tough conversation with their spouse that they were unhappy. And I'm not teaching people in my, on these trips. I'm not giving seminars on how to talk to your boss or talk to your husband. Those are things I'm not necessarily qualified to do. But what I do provide at the events is a sense of confidence. And someone said that like she felt like she got her voice back. And that's why I do what I do. And then the amount of offers that people write, and they go under contract more, they experience more cash flow, which then gives them more freedom to be a better husband or a better parent or a better friend. That's why I do what I do. And that's why the events are so special.
Awesome. Well, you guys heard it here. Go check out Sarah's events because they sound great. All right, so let's switch gears. We're going to kind of do the end of the show a little bit differently because you've been on the show before. I don't want to ask you the same questions. I want to do one deep dive into your favorite deal. Do you have any other deals that you're really excited about that came kind of later? And then we'll ask you a couple questions and we'll wrap up the show.
The for real deal.
Sounds good. Yeah, let's talk about my most recent property.
Okay, great. Let's do it. So where is it?
It's in Des Moines, Iowa.
Okay, and what did you pay for this property?
$180,500.
Okay, and how did you find it?
So my investor-friendly real estate agent found it for me.
So just texted it to you. Nowadays you don't have to do anything. They just come right into your inbox. Awesome.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
Yeah. Well, of course, this means you laid the groundwork, you built a relationship, you told them what you're looking for, and now whenever they see those kind of properties, they go, ooh, this makes me think of Sarah, right? So it does take a little legwork, but once you build those relationships, it can be really profitable. Great. So, okay, what is it? Is it a quad or a duplex? I can't remember the order you said.
It's an up-down duplex. So it's a 2-bedroom, 1-bath on the bottom and a 2-bedroom, 1-bath on the top.
Great. And one thing I love about this configuration is that it gives you options, right? So I don't know yet if you're doing short-term rental, if you're doing medium-term rental, but what's cool is that short-term rentals generally work really well on 4 bedrooms plus, so those bigger properties, because you're trying to get heads in beds, you're charging per person, and you really want to get 2 families if you can and charge a lot. But in the slower times, maybe you rent out the 2 units individually, or you get nurses in there, which they generally want a smaller unit. So it's nice to have a property that can change with the times and the real estate cycles.
Absolutely. Yeah. So what I did is I have a medium-term tenant on the top. So I furnished the top unit. That unit was vacant when I purchased it. And then on the bottom unit is an inherited long-term tenant.
And then did you buy this off market or did it come on the MLS?
I believe it was off market. It's so funny that now I don't even remember, but I think it was off market.
Okay. And so what's your PITI and then what are you getting for rents?
So the principal, interest, tax, and insurance is $884.
My God, I love when they're like so cheap.
I know. And you guys, I bought this in April. I closed April 8th, 2022. So these are not, 2017 numbers. This is 2022. And yeah. 884. The bottom inherited tenant, market rent for her unit is probably $950 to $1,000. And she's just below that.
Already that like pays the whole thing. Crazy.
Exactly. Okay. She's a little below that. She's at $850. And she's been a great tenant. So I'm going to keep her in, especially now that it's fall in Des Moines. We're going to go into winter. I'm not going to raise her rent. If she's listening to the podcast, you're welcome. And so, but then in the spring, I do plan on raising her rent. But she's a great tenant. So that's been going really well. And then the top unit, like I said, it was vacant. So I went in and I furnished it. And then we listed it for $1,700. Then I raised it to $1,850. And now I have someone moving in next week paying $1,900.
Love it. Wow. And it's so funny because sometimes I buy deals that are like good enough and over time sometimes they get really, really good. But I usually don't buy crazy, like knock them out of the parks. I've gotten a couple of those, but it seems like your numbers are always super like it's just super incredible. So, I mean, I think that it's great to see that. And I also just want to tell people that if you're having a hard time finding this, don't be so strict about, okay, I told myself I'm going to have a 15% cash on cash return. If you find a 14 or a 13 and a half, like go for it because they get better over time. And, your first deal might not be the crazy out of the park one, right? So Sarah's first deal, she's still making maybe $100 more than she originally made. So it doesn't have to be such crazy numbers, but these are cool to see that they exist out there even today. Awesome.
Absolutely. And then I have a really funny story with this deal. And so I hope the audience is kind because this makes me sound like an idiot. So here is a really funny oversight that I made on this property. So I'm in the unit. I actually happened to be in Des Moines. I had just bought something the week prior, and I was actually in town furnishing it. So I'm in Des Moines, and I was able to attend what is called the final walkthrough. I had never done a final walkthrough myself before because I've always been out of state or out of country. So I'm doing the final walkthrough and I'm pleasantly surprised. It's my first time inside of the unit. And I'm upstairs because remember it's an up-down duplex. I'm in the vacant unit upstairs and I'm looking out the window. My agent is with me. And I say, "Hey, Chase, who owns the unit or the lot next door?" And he's like, looks at me and he goes, "Ha." And I said, I was like, I don't understand. And he's like, "You own it, you dummy." So I didn't realize that the property came with a vacant lot next door.
Oh, nice. That's funny.
And so
that's cool.
I'm so excited. I now have this vacant lot. I'm in conversations with the city. I'm going to, sever the lots and I'm going to build. And so for $180,000, I bought an up-down duplex that's bringing in, I mean, what is that? $2,700 a month in rental income, and it came with a vacant unit next door.
Cool. Yeah, I bought a place with a vacant unit, and it just ended up being like a huge yard. And then never did anything with it. So, I ended up selling that property later, but I remember looking into it, and it can be complicated to do the building, but I think that could be such a fun adventure, So I hope you do. I hope you do develop it. Awesome. How did you do the financing for this place?
So I have a partner with this deal. So I did an equity partnership. I probably learned how to set it up from you, so thank you.
Great.
And so what I did is I found someone who was willing to get the loan and bring the down payment and any repairs needed, and then we split equity and cash flow.
Okay, great. And so did you just find the deal? Did you pay for furniture? Did you pay for anything? How'd that work?
Yeah, so I tried not to pay for anything, but my partner is a very good negotiator. So she was like, you're going to pay for furniture. And I was like, okay, that's fair. So I found the deal, I managed the deal, and I paid for furniture. And then if we have medium-term tenants in both units, the bottom and the top, I also charge a management fee.
Okay. Yeah, I think it's important for people to see that even though a lot of people default to the 50-50 split, it's basically anything you can negotiate. So there's not really a norm. It's just kind of like everything is negotiable. So, get bold and see what you can get. Cool. Well, that sounds great. So, just in an effort to be like, it's not always just a wow, perfect situation. Are there any downsides to this property? Like, is it pretty old? I think Des Moines, you said they have kind of some annoying, like rental licensing that you have to jump through some hoops. What are some downsides so people just don't go, oh my God, Sarah's so lucky?
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. So Urbandale, Iowa, which is the suburb that my other properties are in, yes, they have this licensing. You have to go through this really in-depth inspection. It's going to cost you money to have the inspection. Then they're going to tell you things that are wrong with it. So then you have to fix those and then pay for the inspection again. So Urbandale, Iowa, I am running into that. But for this particular property, it is in a less desirable neighborhood. That's probably reflected by the purchase price of $180. And so the safety of my tenants is something that's really important to me. So I have, added security cameras, floodlights. Thankfully, there's been no issues with safety, but it definitely is a less desirable neighborhood. It's not dangerous. I feel really good about having that as a medium-term tenant unit, but it's not, the best part of town. Then there was or is an ongoing plumbing issue. So I did buy this completely turnkey. Well, guess what? When you buy something turnkey, you could be buying something where someone cut corners, and that's exactly what happened. And so I believe I'm spending, I want to make sure I'm saying the right numbers. I've spent about $700 figuring out what the problem was. And then I'm probably going to have to spend about $2,700 to $3,200 on resolving this issue. And so not ideal. And because of the increased cash flow, that money's just coming out of the bank. There's reserves in the bank. I don't have to take that dreaded phone call to call my partner and say, hey, we got a problem. We need more money. There's money in the bank. And so that money is just coming out of the bank account. And again, it's all about mindset. So I was able to get this property at such a low price because there are some issues that I'm going to have to deal with throughout time. And in the scheme of things, if it cost me $4,000, there's money in the bank, and that's what the money's for.
Yes, and so that's why it's important to have reserves. Even if you're sharing them between your properties, it's just always nice because there's always surprises. I think it's funny when people buy a home and they're like, oh, I didn't know I'd have to fix stuff. I'm like, well, that's what it is. If you don't buy a brand new home, and actually even if you do buy a brand new home, there's just always things. So that's just what it is. Well, thank you so much for your time today. Do you have any parting words of wisdom for the listeners before we wrap up?
Yeah, I think it's really important. Buy our book, 30 Day Stay, and then take action. I can't tell you how many books I buy and then they just sit on a shelf, or courses that I pay for and then I don't actually go through the course. And so my hope is that you not only buy our book, but you actually take action. And, you're messaging both of us on Instagram saying, oh my gosh, I did it. I have a medium-term rental now. And so that is why we wrote the book. We didn't write the book for our own enjoyment. We wrote it because we really believe in this strategy and we want people to experience increased cash flow like we have.
Yes. Yeah, and if you guys are buying the book before, I think it's November 10th, we have a ton of really cool bonus materials that you get. And so you get a spreadsheet on how to do some deal analysis. You're going to get a furnishing checklist that helps you figure out what you need to buy for your unit. We have a couple of kind of behind the scenes interviews that we did, some with other investors, some just ourselves. We have a Q&A that's going to be live that we'll be doing in December. We'll be talking to anybody who pre-ordered the book. And then last but not least, somebody can win a one-on-one with us. So if you're interested in the book, go to biggerpockets.com/30-day stay. And, we'll have all that in the show notes as well. All right, Sarah. Well, thank you so much. I had a bunch more notes. I was like, I could just talk to you about this and go over here. And then I'm like, it's already been past time. So I got to let Sarah go, guys. But thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
And that was Sarah Weaver. It's so funny because I'm used to Craig asking me, Z, what'd you think? I really enjoyed this conversation with Sarah. And like I said, I had a bunch of notes over here. I was like, oh my gosh, can we talk about inherited tenants? Can we talk more about creative financing? Sarah's done a lot in a short period of time. And because I know her really well, we have a lot of crossover and a lot of things that we can bring up and talk about. So thanks for sticking around for a slightly longer episode. It was a really great conversation. So I hope you guys got a lot out of it. If you do buy our book, when you do buy our book, please tag Sarah and I, because it's just been so fun to see all the different people and to just kind of get on the radar, build relationships with people that are going to be reading our book and asking us questions down the line. And like I said earlier, check out my Facebook group, Airbnb Investing. That's a great place to ask me questions about the book, and I will be going into different strategies there. We do Facebook Lives, and then you have a really great community all over the U.S. that are chatting up each other, asking questions, answering questions. It's just like a really great group of supportive people. So I highly recommend it. All right, guys. Well, as usual, we always ask for a rating and review. So if you like our show, I always think the most powerful thing to do is share it. Share it with one person even that you think could benefit from hearing about medium-term rentals, learning about mindset, getting into financial independence, anything like that. We would be so happy to bring them into our community. And with that, I'm going to leave you guys for this week. Thanks so much.
That's it for this episode of Investify. We hope that these nuggets of real estate wisdom lead to more savvy financial planning and a clearer path towards financial freedom. For more content like this, subscribe to the show at investify.com. Don't forget to leave a rating and share it with your friends. Together, we can transform more real estate newbies into successful and clever investors. Thank you so much for listening. See you on the next one.